This week, I shut down Clinify. I spent a year trying to build this project, something that I thought would have huge impact in the industry that I was in. But it wasn't loss that was the overwhelming feeling. It was relief. That relief taught me more than the 12 months of building did. This is the story of how I spent 12 months building the wrong project, and now the 4 questions that I ask myself before building anything new. I'm a doctor by trade, and every consultation I have generates paperwork that's designed to suit the hospital and the doctors, and not the patient. And it's not a bad thing, it's just the way that it's worked out. The patient never sees their notes, it's written in a language they wouldn't understand, and it's designed for billing and liability, not for better care. Clinify was my attempt to try and fix that. It was a dictation tool for doctors that allowed consultations to be recorded retrospectively or in real time, and from there all the necessary documentation was generated, including something I was particularly excited about called a clinical care receipt. And this, I had hopes in the future would become the new standard for consultation recordings, a document for both parties that, through an objective AI who intended to record and empower both parties in the consultation, would ultimately record and result in both parties leaving the consultation feeling much more empowered and fulfilled. I spent a year building it. I was convinced that it was the most important use of my time. In the meantime, I've had other projects come and go that were probably easier to build and easier to get to market. Effectively, Clinify was killed by 2 things: revenue and regulation. Regulation first. Anything that touches patient data, any software you build, any product you use that handles or processes patient data falls under GDPR, but not just the standard version of GDPR, the medical version, which sits in its own higher tier of scrutiny and regulation. Secondly, building with AI means that your software has to consider the EU AI regulation. That in and of itself is difficult to navigate, but depending on whether your software or device is classified as a medical device, can also have an impact on how much of that regulation and scrutiny you fall under. Navigating just one of those is hard enough. Navigating both of those at the same time, and potentially the third prospect of your software being seen as a medical device, is almost insurmountable when you don't have an R&D budget, time to invest, and money to sit and get audit approval with solicitors. The second killer was revenue, or rather, in Clinify's case, where the revenue was going to come from. It saves time, which makes sense. It could potentially reduce litigation in the future. And the idea is that it would also empower patients and allow them to come away with a better understanding of what went wrong. Those are all a degree of abstraction away from the immediate value proposition of making money for someone or saving money. The value was real, but it was fuzzy and difficult to describe. So, if the warning signs were there, why didn't I act on them? I think there's a couple elements to that. I think I was stuck building because it felt like progress, forgetting though that it wasn't actually taking me closer to my goal of getting products to market. Building Clinify was technically fascinating. Every time I implemented a new feature or fixed a bug, it felt like progress and validated what I was doing. Every time a colleague saw me using it and was fascinated, felt like the external validation I was seeking. But it wasn't. It was interest in a complex problem that I was trying to solve. It wasn't proof or evidence that I had a viable business on my hands. And I've made that mistake now for a year. Here's what I don't want to admit to, but have to. I kind of knew all along that the regulatory hurdles were going to be a problem. And I also knew that the value proposition and sell of Clinify was going to be difficult. But every time those doubts surfaced, I'd go back to building, and I would try and code out the next feature, or better yet, iterate on the front end and the appearance and problem solve the complex UI and how best to display information, and do a deep dive down a rabbit hole on the best kind of UI representations and UX for delivering vast amounts of information. And it felt productive. The building became my shelter from the questions I didn't want to answer. The interesting viable gap is where founders lose years. and I lost one. After I shut Clinify down, I tried to turn the pain into a system, a decision matrix, or a few questions that I could ask myself for all these ideas or potential projects and whether or not they were viable. I landed on 4 questions, and I now ask these 4 every time. Question 1. Does it make or save you money? If you can't explain that in under 10 seconds or a single sentence, then you likely don't have something that is easy to sell on your hands. If it doesn't very clearly make or save money in a quantifiable way, if there are degrees of abstraction between the value proposition and what it is that you're trying to sell, then I think you need to consider whether or not you're ready to put the work in between that, whether it is a behavioral change, whether it's R&D, whether it's research academically that needs to be done. Number 2, what is the regulatory framework that you're building within? If you're building in Europe, assume it's complex until proven otherwise. General business-to-business SaaS seems manageable, at least as a solo founder. Anything in the medical space, anything in the legal space, and anything in the financial space. And if you find that you're slipping into one of these spaces, it doesn't mean that you don't have to pursue it. Potentially you could pivot to something more general to remove yourself one step away. But if this starts to impact on the goal of what you're creating, then I would highly suggest reconsidering. Question 3. Are you building this because it's interesting or because it's viable? And be honest with yourself here. I highly recommend it. This is how I lost a year. I think it should almost be a warning sign that you're probably enjoying the technical challenge too much, as opposed to just creating a simple idea with a clear value proposition. Question 4 that I asked myself, do I have a person who would pay for this product? Not a market, not a persona, a real human person with a name and a job somewhere that I can phone that has expressed interest in paying for this product. Clinify had admirers. That's not the same thing as a customer. And one last thing. If you're working on something now and you imagine shutting it down, really imagine, what do you feel? Is it relief? Because if it is, then you already know. I'm quite lucky that I find myself in the position where my other 2 projects that I've been working on, namely ClaimFlow and Augmentally, pass these 4 questions. But they've been sitting there while I've been working on Clinify. Clear value propositions, manageable regulations. I neglected them because I was working on Clinify. Not anymore. Run your idea through those 4 questions. Be honest about how they score. And let me know in the comments if this helped.